into the game. We're talking wood and grain. Charles bring the heat on Southern Yellow Pine. Mascot U.S. species, all is on the line. Gregg with the Spruce, keeping knowledge defined. Ashen moderates, drop the facts in the booth. We on the buy, the sell ain't no hidden truth. Economics and trends, we got it all so clear. Lumber Word Podcast, best believe we're here. If you want to make more, get in on the score. Join us every week, you'll be hungry for more. Love a bit keen, though, whoop made known. Such rain Charleston, slide, plum ram known. Open to the scene, with the lumber supreme. Charles laying down facts with that southern yellow bling. Matt got that U.S. swagger like strong timber beams. Gregg's insights on Spruce, rewrite the themes. Got the buy side talk, we stacking that flow. Selling knowledge, every week we still a show. Join the Lumber Word crew, let your business grow. For the sharpest minds, is what a place to go.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 157 of the Lumber Word. We have a reoccurring guest, Thomas.Mende. We are so excited to have you on. Tom, thanks. Welcome back.
You're welcome. You must have strange expectations of me. So,
Gregg was like, we got to get Thomas on to talk about Euro and some pine. So we'll start it off, though, by talking a little bit about, we won't talk about what we were talking on before we hit the live button. But
you don't want to talk about that? I mean, that's what people are interested in, though. They want to hear about.
So everybody's day started like shit.
They want to hear about your positive affirmations.
The positive. You're supposed to brush your teeth with your opposite hand while looking in the mirror and saying, I am going to do this today. And I did that today, and everything was downhill since then. But I figure it's coming back. But
you had a stranger brush your teeth?
I did. One thing I'm noticing in the market, and we'll start out with, I'll give an overall view. And Gregg, you and I were talking at one of the mills today. We actually had a good order week this week, taking orders on trucks, on our spruce items that we take in the Northeast, go all the way down to the Southeast along the seaboard. Things are cleaning up a little bit on trucks, but trucks are still tough. And Matt and I talked yesterday. Matt goes, "Are you paying more for trucks?" I'm like, "Yeah, there's a price for getting service and delivering in a week, and there's another price for you can ship it whenever you want, right?" And that's a big spread right now. More people are looking for trucks that you sell them 3 weeks from now for next week, if that makes sense. And, the market's kind of all over the place. Now, I will say on the Eastern spruce market, mills are showing some stuff and taking discounts on some things. Talked to 2 mills today. They said certain things are building and they have to come to the market. One of them are high grade 2x4 16s and 2x6 16s and MSR and premium grade. And so they're dropping down to the 2x4 16-foot 2 and better price. What does that mean? It means we could buy into the Midwest into our reloads probably around $613, Gregg, something like that, on premium 16s.
Lower, yeah,
roughly.
Mm-hmm. Basically, yeah, low 600s, low 600s.
But that's not surprising based on the fact that 2x4 and 2x6 16s are an overvalued item. With that said, there's less millwood on the ground scattered around the U.S. that came across the border in the last 3 or 4 months. There was, I would say, somewhere 30 million plus board feet sitting at reloads in the Northeast. That's now gone. I think a little bit of false expectations that was going to be like that forever. What I mean by that is it doesn't take very much extra lumber on production or production coming off to make prices move. Same with inventory. When you have a little bit extra sitting around, I think people had a little bit easier time buying stuff. That's tightening up. But with that said, the market was a little bit slower this week. Southern pine, I'll go to Charles eventually on this one. Thomas, we talked the other day. I talked to another mill this morning. It kind of said what you said the other day. Got real quiet. Then all of a sudden people came in midweek and wanted to buy 40, 50, 60, 70 trucks of 4-inch and 6-inch straight lengths. And the guy I talked to today said, they think these are the people that will readily switch back and forth with spruce. And they traded some stuff, the one mill I talked to today, at like minus 20 east side on 16 footers. So there's deals to be had if people want to want to buy stuff. Matt, I don't know enough about Western spruce. I know Hemfir is finally where it should be priced. It looks like relative to everything else. And same with the studs. But kind of this is the week that makes you question whether you're right on owning inventory or not, but yet you keep selling. So who wants to jump in first and talk about their pig farm? Charles, you want to go pine first?
That's fine. I mean, you summed it up pretty well. I mean, there's discounts in certain items, and then certain items are hard to find. It's kind of hit and miss. I think over the next, as we've discussed, and I think I've mentioned more than a half a dozen times, there's going to be an opportunity to buy depending on what items you're looking for and what items you specifically need in a time frame, right? And it will probably, the odds of it paying dividends over the next 60 days of owning it are extremely high, in my opinion. So we've kind of bought the whole way through this thing because we've continued to sell and we've had liquidity and takeaway. So it made sense for us to do this, but not everybody's kind of in the same boat, right? There's a lot of people that I've talked to and do business with that liquidity and takeaway wasn't what they anticipated it to be based on weather, storms, ice, snow, no ice, no snow, and just labor availability on some of these bigger jobs and how quickly, some are moving versus others. So in my opinion, big picture, the next 60 days, it'll pay dividends to own inventory. You just got to pick your points and just kind of ride it and not be afraid to pull the trigger. I
wanted you to follow up. Two people told me that people were circulating large blocks of trucks. Now, when they say that, are they circulating them at prices they want to be? Or are they circulating them at prices where they are they looking for market information or by throwing bids out? Or are they actually buying lumber? And were you one of the guys doing that?
I can't answer the last part.
You can neither confirm nor deny that.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's got a number that they'd buy at, right? Whether they had the takeaway or not, because they have an opportunity to be better positioned than they were a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, based on kind of what's going on. But one thing that we're seeing is Central is usually the weakest, right? And West and East kind of converge on Central, and Central breaks first. Yeah. But the break hasn't been as severe as some would anticipate. And there's been some $10 moves. And obviously 4-inch and 16, as you mentioned, is overvalued in spruce. It's 4-inch, especially in pine, is overvalued. I mean, if you're talking 550.
I was wrong when I said east side. The guy said it was on the west side that they took the counter. But then they pick a mill to ship it out of. That's the best freight.
Yeah, 100%. But the other thing is too, is that you have optimizers that are set up to run 100% yield out of logs, which is going to be a 16-foot in the southeast, west side, or central, right? So you're inherently going to have more 16-foot production than ideally anything else, because that's the ideal 100% yield as far as your raw material, and everything else is kind of a trim back. But there have been some discounts on those things if you were able to take it and find a home for it, right? But they weren't huge. They're not as big and as deep as people really want them to be. I think there's a lot of people that are still waiting for $350 wood, and I just don't see it happening. And they haven't bought the whole way through. So they're kind of in a difficult spot.
I was going to jump to Thomas in a second and ask him on the pine side, but one thing I saw too is the low grade market has really moved, and we're seeing that because now people want to buy 2x4 stud and number 2 grade, because a lot of the Canadian mills aren't shipping across economy, because when you add the tariff and everything to it, it's damn near the same cost as the lumber they're selling. Yeah, and that's pushed an area of the market that kind of didn't think they had any buying obstacles for a while, and they're all seeing that now. Thomas, what did you see on your mills on the Southern Pine side this week?
Well, the good news is we hardly have any inventory, so obviously we sold it all. That's why I was looking to my right. I was looking what's for sale. So I know we have one item that we have 8 trucks off, and that's it. And otherwise, it's just onesies, twosies. So I feel like we're in a very strong position. I think this was a good run, and now people are doing a little digesting, waiting for the treaters to consume and actually sell. But it's 73 degrees right now in Atlanta. I sure hope it's going to be a good weekend for the home center selling treated lumber, and that'll be a big surprise at the end of this week. So,
good
Thomas, point. I saw something come across yesterday that said that European shipments to the U.S. in January were up over last year. And I also saw something that came out a couple of weeks ago that shipments to the U.S., and I think the data was through November, were only marginally lower than 2024, which really kind of shocked me because I was under the impression that European shipments to the U.S. were down sharply. I've talked to a couple of ports that we deal in, and they're like, no, it's steady. She goes. And I guess
Yeah, I don't agree with that statement. So
okay, that's why I wanted to ask.
Yeah,
It's like you have a better handle on it than the data that I get.
So I combined looking at some data in Europe, which is about a month ahead of Random Lengths right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at that, here's the European side of things. Europe was down in 2024 compared to 2023 by 21%.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2025, it was up through October by roughly 10%. And that, remember, in October is when the tariff came in. So through November, it's only up by 7%. And I would expect it that by December and January, it'll be down significantly. So it's either going to be completely off and it goes into the negative territory by January.
Is it all of Europe that had a tariff?
Yeah, all of Europe has a tariff. There's nobody exempt. So this 10% applies to everybody. And I think the main reason is really when you look, the tariff is one thing, but the biggest issue facing in Europe is the law costs. Law costs are up a good 20 to 25, or in some areas even higher %. And this is in addition to a 20% loss in the currency. And you combine all of these, you're at a worse situation or similar situation than when you add all the tariffs up from Canada. So you're talking about roughly about the same situation, with the difference being that the Canadian log prices are still significantly cheaper, but obviously they have higher tariff rates. So it's a complete no-brainer that Europe will only ship what Europe has to ship because they want to keep the mills running or want to have a certain kind of operational experience or keep a foot in the market. But the volumes are dropping, and they're dropping significantly now. And I can tell you that
we were working under that assumption the second half of last year, which is why when the numbers came out, and like I said, through like you said, through November. I mean, I do know in some of the ports they've had significant shipments that have arrived in the last few weeks. Is that across?
You know what?
Like
you know what? Greg. You know what the problem is, Greg. I think this is how the lumber people are. Lumber people are lemmings. If you know what kind of animal that is, that's the one that all jumps off the cliff.
I've made my living based on that my entire life, Thomas. Thank you.
So as you know, everybody sits there and everybody was watching what's going to happen to the Canadian tariff, and everybody expects tariff comes in, the price is going to have to come up. European tariffs come in, the price is going to have to come up. Whereas when you look at historical data, every time Canada was hit with a tariff, prices prior went up and then fell down significantly. Correct. So that's exactly obviously what's happened. Everybody was like, oh, I'm going to go on this train, and that didn't happen. I think what's happening now is a little bit different because I think the fundamentals are changing now, and the baseline is very different. The big question in 2026 is demand. And I think the supply side, has sufficiently cornered the market if demand remains the same or slightly increases, or even just has the temporary demand increase from a seasonality. So I think this is going to be somewhat of a different situation. But in the end, nothing defeats economics in the end, and if it's not profitable, and if it's a negative business, and if you don't have certainty what you're getting for the lumber on the other side, you're not going to ship large quantities.
If that lumber stays in Europe, Is it not being produced now, or is it just going somewhere else?
No, I think it's going somewhere else. But European production is way down over the last couple of years. I don't have the numbers in my head now, but even this year they'll expect another major reduction in production. So and I think, Craig, you're right. It's different from country to country. I think a lot of Swedish mills are owned by the forest owners or have some sort of ownership, and I think they're quicker to adjust to that. Whereas Central European is relying on third parties to provide logs, and they're going to be holding on to the high prices as long as they can. So this is going to be an interesting scenario.
And Thomas and again, Greg, and we were all talking about this. It seems to me that some of the increase, or if we think there's extra, it probably is coming out of Sweden. Is that right? According to what some of your stuff showed, Thomas? And a lot of that stuff out of Sweden is a big mill that comes over here and it sells directly to the home centers. So from a trading standpoint, Matt, Charles, Greg, we wouldn't see that wood. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how much of that, where the docs say they're getting that, is that wood coming from Sweden that's going right to the home centers that we never get our fingers on top of, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. As far as the West goes, Ashley, it's really simple. Low grade's really hard to buy and easy to sell and expensive. And the mid grades and high grades are soft, but as opposed to the East where they're discounting 16s are hard to find in the West. And so it's other lengths like, 10s, 12s, 14s, 18s, and 20s that are being discounted. Anything with heavy 16s on it's still relatively easy to sell and hard to buy in the graded lumber in the West. But yeah, it's a frustrating market because you've got one thing, which is say 25% of the market makeup of industrial lumber. That is really, it's like lottery ball type time right now. Get in line. There's so many people trying to find it, and there's just so little of it being made available that it's like you're playing defense in that world right now. And then meanwhile, the 2 and better and the standard and better and the 1 and better and the premium, all that stuff is just sitting there laying around on a mill list, but the tallies don't match what people want to buy. So it's a very frustrating market in the West right now. For both sides, for both the producers and the consumers.
Well, and Matt, I think 16s in the East, they get very heavily influenced by the availability of European lumber on the docks, and that's the go-to item that Thomas, that your mills like to produce and other mills like to produce, and it's also the highest returning item right now. So that that kind of. And it's overvalued relative to the market. So that all makes sense. I guess one of the things, 2 overall observations. We've been talking for the last month, and I think week to week, we have vacillated from being bullish to being bearish to being bullish to being bearish. And so that leads me to go, well, wow, we're probably a lot closer to equilibrium in terms of supply and demand than anything else. And so, market strength is only going to be able to be supported by, a period of inventory accumulation or an increase in end use consumption. I do believe, and we had this conversation, that these prices, that's not going to pull any additional production out of the Canadian markets for sure. And Thomas indicated not on the European market. I guess, Southern pine prices probably are more profitable now. And so that they may get some seasonal increase in pine production.
We saw that one mill close in Alabama yesterday, right? That was, so, our Southern pine.
What is that? That was kind of a unique thing. What was that, Charles? That was a finger joint mill?
No, that a finger joint mill attached to it separately, but they're a dimension mill, right?
It was. Okay.
Yeah. They're a dimension mill owned by the same people, the same family guys that own Southern Parallel in Western Canada, finger joint.
Parallel 55 or whatever that is, or Parallel. Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm assuming, this is my guess, that was a high cost mill or just didn't have I don't know, high cost mill, right? So I guess the question is, and maybe Gregg could point to Thomas, are Southern Pine Mills making money in here, Thomas?
The lumber market can be unpredictable, but with the right tools, you can make confident decisions. Fastmarkets is the trusted home of the Random Lengths weekly report, providing detailed pricing for over 1,600 products, including softwood lumber, structural panels, and more across North America. As for hardwood markets, the Hardwood Market Report is your go-to source for pricing benchmarks, market commentary, and in-depth monthly insights through HMR Executive. These resources give you clarity in a complex market, helping you stay informed and prepared. Fastmarkets Random Lengths price assessments are derived from verified price inputs collected via online submission forms, authenticated physical documentation, and interactions with buyers and sellers across the supply chain. All data is evaluated within Fastmarkets' proprietary assessment platform, Mind, in strict accordance with our published methodologies. Each assessment undergoes a rigorous approval process prior to publication. Key benchmark commodities are subject to independent third-party audits to ensure alignment with Fastmarkets methodologies and compliance with IOSCO principles for price reporting agencies. Get started with Fastmarkets today. Visit fastmarkets.com/lumbertalk to find out more.
That's kind of put me on the spot.
That's why we have you, to put you on the spot.
I'll say yes. Thomas, you don't have to answer. Yes, not very much, and it doesn't make up for the past 2 years, but probably, maybe.
I mean, this week probably, or last week, and you know, but I think that, I mean,
no, that's a good answer.
I think what's happening is you're going to see, and I mean, you already have seen it. I mean, this is not the first Southern Pine Mill to close in the last 2 years or 3 years. So you had this huge surge of new mills being built, and those mills are going to be more competitive than an older mill that hasn't really changed for 20 years or 30 years, or maybe had marginal improvements in productivity. But the new model of mills is going to be a whole lot more efficient. And so in times of low prices, who's going to have to go out first? It's going to be the smaller, inefficient mill. I compare it to to the late 90s and early 2000s in Europe. This is the same thing that happened. These link mills, these big mills were being built, and then smaller mills had to go out of business. They were not competitive. So I think this is going to be the same situation in the South, and has already been. I think, a lot of capacity has gone out of the South. A lot has gotten put in more, but a lot of them has gotten out of the South as well.
So, Ash, my other observation was relative to the futures market. Pretty much all of last year, the futures was carrying a premium, and the farther out months went out to pretty wide spreads, $40s and $50 a thousand. You've got a situation today where front month futures is a marginal discount to the reported prices, and the spread to the next month is in the 20s, not in the 30s and 40s. And trying to wrap my head around, what does that mean, and what can we do with that?
Remember when we talked a couple months ago, Matt, Gregg, Charles, and we were talking about how is there a possibility we could go discounts in the back, and we were like, maybe that would happen in March.
And it's happening. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of happening.
Jim, we're here now.
What was it? Yeah. What was our reasoning for that?
We had a guest on, one of the futures guys that you brought on, that talked about it. He said he expected that the curve would flatten as we got into the year, just based on market makeup and what Thomas is alluding to. If we're closer to equilibrium, then you don't need to price these huge premiums in the back months anymore, and everything just sort of flattens out in terms of it doesn't change your cost to carry. You still got to pay storage charges and interest on money, but it's certainly, from my perspective as a hedger, it makes me less inclined to hedge unless I can, get in. I'll be more interested in the back months at bigger premiums. And it also tells me to be more nimble on my cash buying. Like, how much inventory do I want to carry if I can't really lay off some of the risk on it? And so I'm going to have to be a little bit more disciplined, I guess, when it comes to my buying decisions and my selling decisions. That's kind of how I view it. When futures gives you big premiums, it makes your job pretty easy. But when it gets narrow like this, it makes you need to focus more, right?
Yeah,
and I'm also I'm kind of in under the theory of like the market does what causes the most people the most amount of pain and suffering. And if you can figure out that, then you'll know what it's going to do. And maybe right now that's being a flat market.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you think about it right now, flat market's the worst thing for everybody. Producers still aren't doing very well.
Right.
And that's going to squeeze all the distribution guys. These prices the demand isn't good enough at the retail level so that, they play, kind of whack-a-mole month to month with customers in terms of, every month, one guy in the market takes the cheap business and then the other guy doesn't have it. And then the next month they switch. And so, man, I hope that's not what the next few months end up being, but I think you have to respect that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, can we talk about, well, that's a good point, Greg, and Thomas actually threw some good stats out at me yesterday on housing starts and permits came out this week.
Yeah, so I'm Jimmy.
Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, pull it up. I don't like the headline number, the seasonal adjusted, because I don't know what seasonal adjusted is. I don't know who calculates that. It's way off. But they finally came out with November and December housing starts for last year. So if you look at total starts, you're at a reduction from 2024 of 0.6%. So hardly a change. Of course, the composition is what makes it a little bit more interesting. So the single family, of course, is down, and multifamily is up, and multifamily in 5+ is up more than multifamily in 2 to 4. So that relates then to wood usage. So I tried my Softwood Lumber Board guide of how much wood is used in either one of those categories. So if I apply that, then that would indicate that wood used housing starts were down 2.8%. That's not a lot.
When you were showing me that, it's because you were looking at the amount of usage in 2 to 4 versus higher, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my napkin kind of calculation, So then when you look at what's Canadian shipments was down in 2025, it was down 14%, assuming you got about a 25% market share still for Canadian lumber. And I don't know if that's high or low. Then you're talking about a 3% less wood available. So if you take those two together, you're right back to that equilibrium numbers. And I think this is kind of like when you then look at January shipments over the border from the Canadian Bureau, it's down 30% from January 2026. It's down 30% from January 2025. So this is where I think things are going to become very interesting.
They front-run the Trump tariffs. Remember last year in December and January?
Yeah, that's the reason why, Matt, that's actually the reason why I started looking at these numbers, and that's just not true. So they were down overall 14% from last year, from the year before, and it did not happen. So that's the kind of I posted on LinkedIn about that, and I said, I don't really understand these numbers, because where is the wood? And then somebody said it's on the other side of the border, but it's this did not happen. So.
Well, there definitely is more wood leaving Canada for Asia right now on the low grade side, but that's not going to make up 30%. You basically are just there's a conscious decision there by the producers to either not produce it or not ship it across the border and sell more of it intra Canada. But my guess is they're just not producing it, right? You did lose some production in Canada. We haven't talked about it recently, but there was several announcements made last year, and these tariffs are hurting. Trust me, we own 3 Canadian sawmills. It's not fun.
All you have to do is look at the impairment charges that the publicly traded Canadian companies have taken. You take that when you permanently close facilities, and it's pretty much across the board.
And you also take those when you basically say, I don't think this industry is going to be very good for the next 2 or 3 years.
Sure.
Right? I mean,
Well, how can the fundamentals
honestly, I was
improve?
having this conversation with Rob Cross yesterday, my futures guy, and I said, I hope we don't have another 2025. 2025 was a bunch of head fakes and general direction. The market was down all year for the most part. And a lot of people, you complain, Ashley, from people trying to hit you up for jobs and moving around the industry. You see all that stuff. It happens in down segments of the lumber business. If you've been in here, like we've all been doing this for a long time. So we've seen this before. I hope we don't have to live through that again. I mean, I felt honestly a lot more optimistic about 2026 just because of all the different things that have occurred the last 5-6 months. When you add it all up, it told me a story that was like production is going to be down. And even if demand is the same as last year or even slightly below it, I still feel like enough production has been removed from the marketplace where it's going to actually have a real impact at the times when people care the most, which is coming up right in front of us here, right in the second quarter. And so I just got to trust my gut and my years of knowledge that's right. And if I'm wrong, I'm just going to lose some money and I'll just move on and adapt my trading style for the rest of the year. But just speaking as a personal viewpoint, it would just it'd be a stinker if we had to go through another 2025 for a lot of people, actually.
Well, Mac, a great point. And I think, we've all been, Charles, you're an old soul, so I'll include you in this one. We've all been, and you run a company. So we've all been around this industry for a long time and have been through some really just terrible markets. And Thomas mentioned the fact of people are lemmings. Well, what I've always noticed about companies, ones I've worked at before, ones I've seen, everybody in our industry is always very optimistic until they're not, right? So I see a lot of companies out there right now that went through a bad year last year. And Matt, I'd love to agree with you on this, but this doesn't end until some of these companies, unfortunately, get rid of some people that aren't making money, get rid of some of these companies got really big in the distribution, in the lumber industry, and haven't downsized yet. And I know that sounds horrible, and I think some of them are in the process of making some of those decisions.
Well, and Matt, I mean, honestly, we lost him.
There we go.
I mean, I think a flat market's going to be even worse than last year. I mean, last year at least you had volatility. Flat market, that's no good for anybody.
No, you certainly have to, like Thomas said, if we're just in supply and demand, now you got to go hunt and peck for finding the items that are the most undervalued, overvalued, like find the Eastern mills that close and what did they produce most of, and you look for those links and I mean, and Matt, it's always the thing is you want to get disciplined after you've already bought a bunch of lumber, right? I know that's how I am. and that's how it's hard. But one thing I wanted to ask Thomas too is, Thomas, you're on the Softwood Lumber Board. What do they do? Because I honestly, they got a lot of people on it. After I went through the website and looked at how big it is, and how much. I mean, they're out there advocating for softwood lumber usage, right? Through everything from CLT to building with wood, right? And like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll try to. It's my first time having to explain this publicly, but maybe I'll do a good job. We'll see. It's the Softwood Lumber Board is a mandatory contribution scheme similar to the Gut Milk campaigns that we all remember from a few years ago, where the dairy farmers voted together to participate this, and then if a certain portion of your population or your industry has voted to implement a scheme like that, everybody is becomes part of it. So for every board foot produced past a certain level in production from U.S. mills, and for every board foot imported, there is a fee charged on the imports. The USDA collects it at the border, customers border directly at the border, and otherwise it's a voluntary self-reporting process for the rest of the industry. And that comes into a marketing pot, and the the Softwood Lumber Board consists of industry, let's call them veterans and high-level industry executives, as well as other folks that are with a vested interest or have had some experience with new technologies such as CLT. So the Softwood Lumber Board then supports marketing programs to increase the use of softwood lumber. And of course, this is kind of like where the statistics of wood usage comes from. If we build more homes in that +5 category and increase market share from 58% to 65%, that has a tremendous amount of wood associated with it. And that's the kind of things that the Softwood Lumber Board does, supporting these kind of organizations like Woodworks and others to increase the overall consumption of wood products in constructions. And of course, CLT is only one of those areas, but I showed you yesterday, now more and more projects are coming out with multifamily projects that use CLT as the ceiling and floor component. That's really has a tremendous potential because it can bring CLT into the lumber distribution side of things. Basically, a distributor could carry CLT panels of a certain size and, with a small investment in a CNC machine, could supply multifamily projects quite as simple as if they were selling engineered wood or glulam products and so on. So I think there's a couple really positive things going on. Warehouses and data centers out of wood are being built this year and have been built. I think warehouses have been built in the US already now, but data centers are up for this year. So there's some great opportunities for the wood industry in general to increase its usage.
Are you still relying on snail mail publications from the 70s to reach the forest products industry? It's time to upgrade. Advertise in the Lumber Word podcast and get in front of the lumber world every single week. Our episodes are tuned in by the largest segment of influencers inside and adjacent to the forest product sector, decision makers who shape the industry. Ditch those tens of thousands spent on outdated print ads and project your product or service across the podcast universe instead. Ready to make the switch? Head to thelumberchannel.com, click on Connect, and drop us a line with your info. Let's amplify your message today.
So basically, it's like you said, the Got Milk campaign or the pork checkoff one, where they did
That's
the
right.
other white meat, and they charge like a penny a pound for this, and they do the marketing for them. That's really cool. And I also want you to talk what's going on at Binderholz and what you want to pitch, whatever you do, and how what.
Yeah, so I think we. As our sawmills, what I failed to mention earlier on the pine side, our sawmills are a lot different. We don't rely on dimension lumber sales. We make 20 or 25 different sizes in between. So our recovery is significantly different. So that's always an opportunity, particularly now when you see low grade prices increase. Those sideboards and millimeter sizes might become a much more attractive option than having to buy something at a high price and rip and cut it again. So that's obviously one of our big features. And otherwise, our main focus is really still on micro CLT panels. So I think there's some significant inroads now in the distribution of that, both in projects being specified by architects. For this year, there's a number of large projects and high-profile ones, and also in the lumber distribution side. So these panels are never far away from me. Sitting right next to me, always with me. It's a great product. I love it, and this product is beautiful, strong, and
what do they use it for?
Huge part. Literally everything. In Europe, we call them 3-layer panels, and they've been sold for 30 years, Matt. And so it's like plywood, but it's made out of solid wood, just in thin sizes from 1/2 inch to 2 3/8 inch. It's wall paneling, it's furniture, it's doors, it's
Is it exterior and interior, or is it just interior?
Yes, yeah, we make them in thermal wood, for example. Okay. So you can use them exterior as siding in thermal wood. could be in multiple different colors and applications. But just had a guy doing barn doors out of the thick ones, the 2 3/8. So just, basically has a big giant slab, and now all he has to do is do his CNC work, and he's done. So in Europe, it's so prevalent that when you ask somebody, what are you using it for? And our mill said, we don't know. We just sell it to distributors, So, and yeah.
Is it custom
fantastic.
sized, or is it standardized sized?
Yeah. So the original sizes of the big panels, 16 foot by 4 foot and 16 foot by 6.7 feet wide. So giant panels that you can feed into a large CNC, be incredibly efficient in cutting out certain areas. And then, of course, we cut them down to more traditional sizes like 2x4, 2x6, 2x8, 2x8, 2x10, and 4x8 sheets.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
How is it? How is that sold now here, Thomas?
So the 2x4 and is now in Home Depot on the West Coast.
Okay.
In over 40 stores. And we're longer in the Canadian market. It's now pretty much almost all over Canada in Home Depot, and 2 foot by 4 and 2 foot by 8 foot panels. And there the focus is primarily as a wall or ceiling cover. And other than that, it's available for project basis or for woodworkers or woodworking shop, millwork shops. We keep inventory in Seattle. We keep inventory in Savannah now. And so we can ship very quickly to any kind of job site.
So it really replaces that stuff like we used to keep at the lumber yard, that old pattern stock that people used to build a rec room in the basement or build a barn outside, and they wanted that mat, like that the ponderosa pine and the pattern
pine boards, tongue and groove,
and then you'd pattern them, and then you'd stain them or paint them, and that seems like a pretty cool alternative, actually.
Yeah, it's a fast installing alternative. I think that's the key, and incredibly strong because of the laminations, face glued, edge glued, and cross laminated. So it's a straight product. It's strong, and so fast.
A lot like you.
I wonder if the upper Midwest, the sort of the German,
cabins,
Swedish, the North Woods look, I guess is what I call it. When you go to Wisconsin, you see a cabin. Yeah. I wonder if they would adopt that type of a product up there. Anywhere where they like wood paneling and wood grain, in Oregon, Absolutely. You see a lot of that. We have a lot of wood here, so you see a lot of wood, like really cool wood interiors.
Is it priced in board feet or square feet?
Square feet.
Okay. Nice. Hey, Matt, just breaking news on the pod right now. I know you originally said, hey, we should really talk about the Supreme Court throwing out the tariffs. Just out. Trump responds to tariff ruling. He will very, very disappointed in the Supreme Court, but that Brett Kavanaugh's dissent was genius. And he's a man of great ability. And he will now impose tariffs under a new and different authority.
Yeah. I mean, nothing's going to stop him.
Shocker.
Right. I'm sure that they knew this was going to happen a month ago. I mean, that's why they've been slow walking this decision, right? So I'm sure that I figured they were going to strike him down just because it was taking them so long. It doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. When you've got bad news, you don't want to rush to the front of the line. You want to put it in the back burner, and you don't want to deal with it. So that's what the Supreme Court did. They knew it was going to be bad news, and they just kind of slowed the whole process down. And then meanwhile, Trump and his administration probably 2, 3, 4 months ago figured that was going to happen and already have plan B, plan C, and plan D contingencies under some different authorities to just move forward. So
that's what
so basically it's like the lumber market. Absolutely. It's just the flats on decisions.
Yeah, exactly. No change. Hey, Thomas, always great to have you on and hear you get your insight. And we really, really, really appreciate, your support. I need to roll off, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Sounds good.
Everybody have a great week.
Right.
I'll be gone next week.
All right.
Oh, you will?
Thanks,
okay.
Thomas.
Thanks, Thomas.
Enjoy your
Thanks,
time
guys.
off, Matt.
Good talking to you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry. including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.